Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the Score Summit sets for football. These are 1995 and 1996. Now, Score was never really a big player in the world of ultra-premium cards. They'd done a really good job in 1991 of making the premium set called Pinnacle, but after that they could never quite get the 90s down. They could never quite figure it out. And so in 1995, they were one of the two companies that really hit 95 hard. We didn't know it at the time, but 1994 was kind of like the calm before the storm. Everybody was trying to make really, really fancy cards, and what nobody realized at the time was that that was not the direction they needed to go. They needed to just let loose and make really crazy stuff. That was what the decade was going to be. We were already starting to see it, but it needed to be owned. And Score decided to really, really go after this with three sets that were really quite impressive. Those sets being Select Certified, Zenith, and Summit. Of those, two of the sets would continue on. Basically, they would continue until the company ran out of business, but Summit was only 2 years. And Summit was really probably the most 90s of all of these sets. These were the cards that really fit into the middle decades. They got way carried away, and I'm not sure they could have made a 97 set. It would have been interesting to see what they would have tried. But if you were going to make a mid-90s card, this was about as mid-90s as it got. The way that they built the card was they understood that parallels was going to be the key. So they had to build the card to handle parallels. And they did a great job with that. First off, they had a thick card stock, so they were already starting off with a really fancy card. They made the card in a very simplified fashion with a simple white border, a cutout of the player, and then a partial background kind of hidden behind some gold detailing. They threw all these elements on in a very well balanced manner. The card has a high gloss on it, looked great. On the back, it looks kind of like a Stadium Club card. It's a pretty mediocre back, but that's not the point. Pinnacle understood that what this card needed to be was all about the front. It needed to be all about the parallel. So the back just, it had to be something, and so it kind of was. And the back does kind of fit with the front, but with the parallel was called Ground Zero, and this was a really, really impressive parallel. This was a parallel where when you're going through the pack and you run into one of these, it just flashes at you, and it really gets you excited. This was one of those few cards where it was like a card collector had come up with it, somebody who actually understands what it's like to open packs. You go flipping through these white cards, and then there's this one that just has this rainbow holofoil shine, and it's just glowing. And it's very vibrant and dynamic. Basically, it was a bunch of little facets of rainbow holofoil refracting off of the card, built on diagonal striations. And basically the entire card, except for the gold foil, had this effect, although some portions of the card, like the image of the player, was less affected by this. But that meant that the whole card was just, it was alive, it was electric, and it was a really cool effect that they made. The effect completely takes over the card. You basically can't see the card, but that's not the point. The point is not to see the card at that point. The point is to see the parallel, what the parallel was. And it made it extremely fun. So you got to collect the main cards, and you got to collect the parallels, and they all looked great, although none of them were really spectacular, but it was the fun of these packs. That's what they were about. And it's a little surprising to say this because these were pretty expensive packs, but these were chase cards. That's what this set was completely built around, and that's exactly how it worked. They also had a couple of subsets, the first one being Collision Course, and this was basically defensive players, and they had a bigger background on it. That was kind of the way that it worked. And then they had their rookies, and the rookies were basically a split panel in the back. On one side you had a background, the other was just white, and they were really good close-up shots of the rookies, so they looked really good. And then you had 1995 Offensive Weapons, which was, offensive players. And this, again, it's just kind of a subset that goes at the end of the set. They look good within the set. And then they did something I like where they have players on the fronts of all the checklists. So each checklist has a different player. And then the last checklist for the insert cards, which they call the chase cards, has a photo from the rookie photo shoot. And that makes it a really great card. It actually looks really fantastic. And it's got Terrell Davis on it too, so it does have a slightly higher level of collectability. But all of these cards obviously have the parallels, as you've seen, and the checklists look a little bit different from the rest of the set because they don't have any gold foil on them, so the whole thing is just the vibrant effect of the parallel. But that was the set. And they didn't do anything beyond that. It was just a simple single parallel, and the parallel wasn't like one per pack, so they were still kind of tough to chase. But the inserts, they only did 3 inserts, and they were all pretty much straightforward. And here, this is where 95 kind of fell off. The first insert was Backfield Stars, and this is basically a bunch of running backs. This actually looks more like a Select Certified card than it does Summit. And it's a big rainbow holofoil mirrored card with the player basically kind of sticking out from that. That's about it. It's a pretty bland card. And then they have the Rookie Summit cards, and these are, it's more of a mirror background behind the player, and these players tend to have a lot of sky behind them, so these cards actually look really pretty cool because the player is so isolated and stands out so much from this card that's not dynamic, but that mirror-like quality on the back, it gives it a very strong element that the rest of the card design really doesn't provide, and so it actually is quite strong, which is kind of interesting about this. And also, I like on the back, they have kind of a similar effect on the back. So that's a neat thing about the card is the front and the back both have this quality to it. And then they have their Team Summit cards. And this is kind of like, carryover from what they were doing in Score proper. And this card has a weird effect called Spectra Etched. And it's basically like a hollow foil background with some ridges that come off in a radial pattern. And it really feels more like a Score card. It's okay, but it doesn't have its own dynamism. So 95 was an interesting year because they came out with a great idea and they didn't really build the inserts to match up with the set. In 96 though, they decided to really go headlong into parallels, and not just into parallels, but into different versions of the card, which I think they got a little too carried away, and I think that's why they didn't do a 97 set, but it made this card set a whole lot more interesting. So for 96, they made a black card with some kind of dark gray lines in the black. I don't know why they did that. They didn't need to do it. The black looks really good. And then they have a big oval for the portrait of the player, or for the player which kind of comes across as a portrait. It has some jagged lines around it. It has some gold detailing, and that's it. It is definitely not a good card design. 95, the cards look really, really good. 96, this is a set that is all about the parallels. The card back does look better than the previous year. This is actually a pretty good card back. It doesn't have a lot of good information on it, but the card back itself, it's almost like they designed the card back better than they designed the card front. But again, this set was all about the parallels, and this design was a great way to showcase the parallels. The first parallel being Ground Zero. And this, again, not one per pack, but this was a more common parallel. And they used the same technique, but instead of using a bunch of little tiny facets, they still had the striated pattern, but they had kind of like big fields with a curve throughout the field of how the light is affected. So the card has a different kind of brilliance. Instead of being a big speckly spectacle, kind of like a firework, this was more a bunch of things going on that had a different feel. I happen to like 95 better than 96, but the 96 card still looks really good. They also had Artist Proof, and Artist Proof was where this was what Score Pinnacle did. They did this in just about all of their cards. And with this, they went back to the original design. They replaced all the gold foil with kind of a gold holofoil treatment. And then they have the word Artist Proof that's over on the left side of the oval, just on the inside. That's basically the only difference. But these are a lot more rare. And in fact, all the Ground Zero cards actually have a little tag on the back that says Ground Zero. With Artist Proof, they don't do anything in the back. It's just on the front where you see it. But they wanted to go beyond this, so they actually did separate releases. They did silver foil release, and they did their premium stock release. And the silver foil cards are basically, they replaced all the black with kind of a silver mirror effect, and that's about it. It's not a dynamic card. It's interesting in that it's different, but kind of like with the main cards in the set, it's not all that interesting. The premium stock, however, is different because they put a hollow foil treatment over that silver mirror effect, and so these cards, they actually are more dynamic, and they look really good. They don't look phenomenal, but they do look good. And so that means that there are 5 different versions of every single card throughout the whole 200 card set. There are 5 versions of every single card. And it created a different level of collecting that was both more fun and more frustrating, because when you have more parallels, it's fun to try to get all those parallels, primarily if you're collecting teams or players. But when you got to buy different packs, this is something that Collector's Edge had already tried, and it didn't work with them, and they tried it here in Score. In fact, they would try it again the next year with Score proper. So Score was kind of playing around with this, and the idea of just giving people more packs to purchase, that's a fun idea as long as people are interested in doing that. But when you collect one set and then you have to collect the same set out of a whole nother set of packs and boxes, and then you got to collect the same set again out of it gets to be a lot. So it wasn't a great model at the time, but down the road it provided a different level of collecting for us. So it's kind of fun in that regard. And their rookies were basically, they were the same kind of design, except instead of an oval they have a big shield, and that's pretty much about the only difference. The card back looks a whole lot better because they got rid of they didn't have statistics on these cards per se. So here they just had a little write-up, and so here's where the card backs really do look good. And obviously these have all the parallels. And then they have their quarter horses subset. And this subset is, it's basically quarterbacks. And this goes completely away from everything else. It does not have a border. It has some multicolored background panels and kind of a mess of a card. It doesn't look like it fits with the set. I don't like the cards. And it's kind of interesting when you look at the parallels, because with the ground zero, that looks the way you would expect. The way the artist proof works is as you would expect. But what do you do with the silver foil and with the premium stock? And with here, they basically just put the treatment over the back, and I don't like this subset. I don't. They did do the checklist the same way. So again, you have the players on the front, and that's basically the set. But the inserts for this set, the inserts really did get pretty creative. First off, you have Hit the Hole, and this is basically a bunch of running backs. And this is a tricky card for me to really grade, because I've never liked these cards because they don't have a design per se. Because they don't have a border or any design work on it, really, for the most part. The cards are kind of lackadaisical, but if you stop and really take the time to look at the cards, they're actually really good. First off, they have red foil, which is an underused detail on cards. I always love it when they use, because it has a richness that always comes through really well. I don't like the orangish yellow stripe that they have on it, but that's not too bad. But the reason they have that stripe is to make the player stand out. And if you take the time to really look at this card, you'll find that the player actually does come out well, and the images are very, very well designed, and so the card has a good design to it, but it takes a while to see it. It really is a problem that these cards have, that it's too well intended. And then the back is very bright in its color. And these cards are numbered out of 1,000, and again, you have the red foil. Looks really nice in these cards. Then you have Aspirations, and Aspirations is this is a really great card to find in packs. It looks good. It's got blue around the outside of the card, and then it fades into almost a halo right around the player. So the player comes out really well. But the blue around the outside of the card, it is a good card design, but when you find these in the packs, they really do have a lively quality. They're a fun discovery to have. So these are among the cards that you really enjoy finding in packs, because it gives you that excitement of the process of collecting cards. And these cards are pretty common. They're numbered out of 8,000, so it's easy to get these cards. And what I really like about the cards is the whole point of the card is it's the player talking about the heroes that they have. So every player, it's a quote that they have talking about who they looked up to. And I like it when they do that in cards, because cards are for kids. They really are. And so eventually some of us turn into grown-ups, and when we do, we can still look back and find these elements of kid that still exists in us, and it kind of pulls us out. And so I like looking at these cards and remembering the youthful exuberance of finding these cards. That's what this set does for me. And so to me, this is a great card set to collect, because one, it's pretty common, so it's easy to get a hold of, and two, it does have that personal quality where the player is actually speaking to you. Now we get to third and long, which is where we start to get into the parallels. And third and long is basically a cutout of the player with kind of a hollow foil treatment of the background, and that's pretty much the card front. On the card back, I like this card back. It's a pretty well designed card back. All the cards are numbered out of 2,000 individually. I like having the hollow foil for the numbers themselves. But this is all about the parallels. And so the first parallel that you run into is actually the promo for the set. Whenever you got a promo pack, they had one of these cards in there. And the promos are basically the exact same. It's just that they replaced the serial number out of 2000 with promo/2000, meaning that the cards in the set are going to be serial numbered out of 2000. So these are not serial numbered, but they're almost identical to the main cards in the set. So it's a cool little parallel that you get to hunt after. But the main parallel is the Mirage cards. And I don't know, I can't remember if the Mirage cards weren't done yet by the time that they were filling the packs, or whether they wanted to have an exchange component to how these cards were collected. But whatever it was, in the initial release of cards, they released these Mirage redemption cards. And the Mirage redemption cards are almost identical to the Mirage cards. So basically all of the holofoil background gets replaced by a very muted, very light background around the player. And then you have Mirage redemption card on one side. And on the back, you look, and it's all black and white here. I love the colors on the main ones. It's a pretty nice contrast to see the black and white here on the back. And you'll notice that it's numbered out of 600. It's actually serial numbered out of 600. And the idea is when you send this in, then they send you that card numbered out of that serial number. So if you ended up with, say, card number 1 out of 600, you sent it in, they sent you 1 out of 600. And that means that there are 600 redemption cards, there are 600 of the redeemed cards. And there's no difference between them, except every time that a redemption card gets sent in, it gets replaced. So in theory, there are only 600 of these cards. Now, Pinnacle went out of business shortly thereafter, so unredeemed cards, and I don't know if they destroyed the redemption cards, those might have flooded into the market. So I don't know if there are only 600 of each of these cards, or if there are actually 1,200 of each of these cards. But don't think that this is just 600 and 600, because actually the way they were supposed to work is that together there were 600, which means that there was more like 300 and 300, that kind of way of thinking. The big difference between the cards, of course, is on the card back, but the other way that you see the difference is that on the redemption cards, it has kind of a ghosting of the third and long emblem in the middle, which is kind of like a football in profile with the text in it. With the redemption card, the actual redeemed card, that is replaced with kind of a holofoil. It's a different kind of ghosting that's really cool, where in a certain effect, you don't see anything, and then you turn it, and then different parts of that emblem come into play, and so it makes this really cool little item that you get to kind of discover as you go through. A really, really cool technique that they did that I love. And I also love that they had the redemption cards in the packs, and then these were cards that you had to send away for. So it gives you 2 more cards. So there are actually 4 versions of each one of these cards. The last insert set was Turf Team, and this is actually an embossed card. It's not a heavily embossed card. Basically, there's a goalpost and there's an emblem around the Turf Team logo, and that's embossed. The rest of it is not. It's just enough to make it kind of cool. But the idea of the card is basically that you have a stadium with a goalpost, and then behind the goalpost you have a 600-foot tall football player standing behind the stadium. And it looks really good. I do like how it looks. And then on the card back's the same as the card front. It's just that up in the sky they changed what they had up there. And these were numbered out of 4,000. And then they had a parallel, which is basically the ground zero effect on the same card. So it's the same with the ground zero, and then on the back it's numbered out of 500. So obviously much more rare. This is the most rare of all of these cards. And that's what they did for these inserts. And I love the fact that they actually did parallels for the inserts, and especially the fact they got really carried away with one of the insert sets. So that was their grand hurrah. And I look at the set, and I look at what happened in '97, and I really, like I said, I don't know how they could have fit into the '97 market, but they didn't even seem to really try. So that was it. We got 2 years, and we got a really classic mid-90s set. It's a lot of cards to collect if you want to go after it, but it is a fun one to go after because there is so much craziness to go after. You know, obviously the main set, and then the 2 alternate sets are more the kinds of things you're going to buy as complete sets, and then you've got to kind of pick and put together the 2 parallel sets kind of on your own. But it's a lot, and I love that they did this. So I'll be looking at Zenith, and I'll be looking at Select Certified later on to see what those other 2 sets did. But this is Summit. So hope that you enjoyed the video. Hope that you learned something. Hope that you check out my other videos and subscribe if you haven't done so. And thank you very much for watching.